Hello, everybody. I am back with a few more Kubernetes interview questions. Again, I'm going to put in the link below and the description below the link to a GitHub repo that has all of these questions in written format, questions and answers. There's like 280 of them by now. So if if you prefer a written format of these videos, that's probably a better way to go. All right, question I think it's number 8 now. Um, why do we even need Kubernetes? What problem does it solve, and what new problem does it create? So to understand, when an interviewer is asking you this question, he's looking for your knowledge of the history of how things have evolved. After virtual machines, developers went into Docker. That does solve a whole another set of problems. But when you are creating Docker images for your applications, where do you run it? You can't possibly be running manually managing all these Docker images in production. You might have 200 different microservices. You might have Docker images that are another 200 of them, whatever. How do you then orchestrate your containers in production, in staging, in different environments, different versions, and whatnot, right? How do you define resource requirements? How do you manage scaling, right? All of these problems that came from using Docker containers are solved by Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is basically a container orchestration platform, and then it got developed into much bigger things. But in a nutshell, that's the problem Kubernetes solved, and that's why we need it. Now, what new problem does it actually create? Well, there's two that comes to mind. One is, once you have Kubernetes, now you need to solve your CI/CD problem all over again. When you had your virtual machines, you probably had some kind of CI/CD pipelines that ran into production, but now you have to do the same thing for Kubernetes platform. And there are solutions to that. Argo is one of them, but that's one problem that Kubernetes creates. The second example I can think of is secrets, managing secrets now, right? We had different ways of keeping secrets when you ran applications on virtual machines. Now we have to have a way to have secrets that these containers that live and die all the time have a way for it to grab the secret that it needs, like passwords or service accounts or what have you, right? So those are the two problems I can think of right away that Kubernetes creates, right? Next question, I think question number 9 is, what happens if a container uses too much CPU or too much memory? If a container uses too much CPU, it just gets throttled. It can't really use more CPUs than it has been given. If it's using too much memory, it will get evicted from the host where it's running, right? So that's something you have to know for your interviews that has Kubernetes as a topic. Question number 10. Imagine if you have 200 microservices in your clusters. How do you manage security of each one? How do you avoid toil in this case, right? The answer here is role-based access control. It's really no different than AWS IAM roles or similar IAM roles in Google Cloud. So the idea is you define a role that has access to do certain things, and then you create service accounts that 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 gets those roles. So then you don't have to you don't have to manually manage hundreds of permissions. You just say, okay, this service account has permissions to do these things, and those permissions are part of a role, and this service account is the master, is the subject matter. So you assign the service account to that role, and that's how off you go. So that's a role-based way of accessing and managing permissions when the production is very wide, right? The other problem will be personal to you. The interviewer might ask you, what is the hardest production problem you have solved or was a part of? In this case, you really have to think. You have to think about this question ahead of time, because you don't want to think about it too much live during the interview. So whatever problem you have faced in Kubernetes in real life, maybe it was a complex resourcing problem or a scaling problem, what have you. You have to be ready to answer that question based on your own experience, but be ready for that. All right, that was question number 11, I think. I will see you in the next Kubernetes interview video.